And welcome everyone to the Shitlord Preachers podcast. My name is Amos Joseph, joined by my friend Brook Potter in the UK. This is episode 39. We don't have a title working for this one yet, but we'll find one by the end of the episode. But how's it going today, Brook?
It's getting cold. Not Minnesota cold, because that's not even cold. That's like a whole other level. But we are starting to see the first signs of snow. We've had a bit of snow out here in Essex for like 3 minutes.
It only took till the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Well, we normally get winter out here in the UK between January and February mostly. Possibly as late as March, not always. But yeah, we tend to be a late start when it comes to the winter.
So for those of us joining us for the first time, Shitlord Preachers basically is Brooke and myself, who are both former preachers, now reformed shitlords. Basically, we come on the show, talk about different topics, anything from social, political commentary, cultural commentary, and then other topics we like talking about. We're starting to incorporate a little bit more ever since we've become independent again, like we're going to be talking about later today. But we're moving to Sundays now. So Sunday mornings, 11 o'clock Central Time, we will be on the air, and we will be, of course, still staying with our current schedule of posting the podcast Tuesdays, so people can listen to that on their way to work on Tuesdays if they miss it, or listen to the video. But if you want to listen to a video, you got to get YouTube Premium, Red, whatever it's called, RedTube.
It's no. Red tube is something else.
I know. I said that on purpose, and people know that. But it's you gotta pay a monthly thing so you can listen to YouTube videos off the air, but podcasting form Tuesdays in the morning. So, but yeah, thanks everyone for joining us, and I think this will help too. Being Sundays, most people are at home. Most people are not working. They can listen, and we actually have a viewer, which is a good thing. So,
hello, viewer.
That's awesome. But yeah, it's actually that might be me. But anyways, I always
had a hopes up there. Had a hopes up.
I usually have the show going on in the background in case I have to engage in the chat. But if anyone does want to join us, definitely come on, and then we'll be checking the chat. So today we're going to be talking about. Well, we're going to start off with this shutdown.
Government shutdown. Longest U.S. government shutdown in history. Is that right?
I mean, it's a partial shutdown. Technically, Correct. It's not. It's. I mean, excuse me. When you're, what is it? 80% of operational budget.
Yeah.
You remove the non-essential programs. It's like, what does that even mean? Non-essential. Like, why was it running to begin with? It was like the U.S. Department of like Agriculture, the Parks Departments.
Probably some national monuments.
The TSA.
Oh, thank God. So nobody's being molested at the airports. How nice.
Yeah.
Make America great again.
I mean, even just like, yeah, because we really need that security theater. There's that. There's also the there's a whole bunch of other departments, and that's kind of like what I kind of have I had a little problem with it at first, because the IRS was at risk of being shut down as well, or remaining shut down during this.
Now you'd have to explain that, because to most of our listeners who know the IRS is the tax collection agency, isn't that being shut down a good thing?
It depends on why it's shut down and what services are shut down. As a principle, the IRS I don't think should exist at all. But again, and that's it, because on the principle of taxation being theft, and income tax is just a complete joke, we want our money back.
Like, you need to explain that. You need to explain that to the international audience. What is getting your money back?
I mean, so every 2 weeks, or depending upon what your pay periods are, people get paid. You get a check. You get a little pay stub on there that says, well, you get paid this much. But after FICA, basically that's your tax withholdings. So you have your state and your federal tax withholdings. For me, state and federal combined is around 21% of my paycheck is taken. That's just your Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all combined. You get, and FICA, which is actual just taxes. So with your taxes being withdrawn from your check, they're withheld. They're held on to by the government. They hold on to it for the year, preparing for the next, well, however they allocate that budget. So that's your tax revenue. And then at the end of the year, coming into the new year, which is between January and April, which is the first, April 15th is the first day where you have to, by that day, you should file, unless you have to file an extension, which goes towards October, I think, 6 months out. You file your tax returns. I usually get it done. Like my tax returns are in before the end of January, usually.
Right.
Because your forms get in, you get these things called W-2s. That's just the standard employee, American employee gets a W-2. It just shows you what's your taxable income, what you paid in, and such. And then after applying exemptions and write-offs and so on, you get your actual tax bracket is calculated based on your tax bracket and how much money you're at is actual taxable. You subtract like how much, then you take out how much money. You compare that to how much money you actually paid in is withheld by the government. Calculate that, and they realize, oh, you only owe this much in taxes, but this much you weren't supposed to pay. But since we've withheld it from you, we do a tax return. We return the difference. On the state, and the state and federal are two separate tax returns, depending upon your state. Now, if you're in states like Texas or Florida, you might not have any, state-wise, you don't pay income tax to begin with.
Right.
Excuse me. So there's other tax returns like property tax returns and so on. I would technically file a property tax return since I rent in an apartment. The money I pay into this, they send me a statement that shows what I paid in rent, calculate the property tax rate of the area, and then they figure how much I'm owed in money there too. That's like a small one. I might get a couple $100 there. Whereas as a tax return on the federal and state combined, I'm probably getting more. We'll just say we'll leave it at that. I tend to be.
You're basically waiting for the return in terms of the federal government has to return the difference between what you paid in and what you might actually owe, which would be
the
less.
Federal and the state. They both send me money back for like, oh, you've paid in too. It's basically saying you paid in too much.
Right.
We're going to give you back the difference. So with the government shutdown, because of, and you should, Brooke had sent me this article from Bloomberg. We'll include that in the description below. Basically, it talks about, according to what's called the AntiDeficiency Act, I think it is.
Something like that, yeah.
It's a law that basically dictates what a shutdown entails. And by the interpretation of that law, the IRS, they've looked at it further to see that the IRS actually should get, according to the Office of Budget and Management at the White House, they've made a statement that actually they will allocate of this 80% of the money being used will go to the IRS to process tax returns. Whereas before, a lot of people were under the assumption that it wasn't going to be operating. It has to do with how they interpret that law, and they're arguing to actually try to keep the IRS afloat during the shutdown to alleviate political pressures. Because with the shutdown in place and the political pressures, it is a stronger play to force both the Republicans and Democrats to give in. But with alleviating that pressure, Trump can actually be given more power to continue the shutdown.
Right.
Because of now, I could dip into, the welfare aspect. TSA agents are now quitting in droves. There's a lot of funding problems with, because the big thing, the big bargaining chip that the Democrats are pushing is individuals that are federal employees that aren't getting paid.
Yeah.
But we talked about this, how once the shutdown is done, they all get paid back anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. The last time this was attempted, which is under Obama. And I mean, the rhetoric, it's funny. The rhetoric from the media is completely different between when Obama did it versus when Trump is doing it. But that's a whole other story. But
because he shut down for Obamacare, right?
Yeah, it was Obamacare, and it was something else. I can't remember what it was. And there's a lot of propaganda going out now. People are saying it was people shut it down for like $1 billion for fighting Ebola or some shit. No, that wasn't it at all. It was over the budget, and the Republicans shut it down. The Freedom Caucus shut it down over spending, and Obama didn't give in. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the U.S. government still has not passed a budget. They keep passing these continuing resolutions to just fund the government up until a certain point. Is that right?
So, it depends how you look at it. I mean, they can pass resolutions to get some budget going, like the Congress can force small bits of budget to come through to like money.
Yeah. It's
money.
continuing resolutions.
Just money. Just hey, let's try to get a little more money here, a little more money there, and the next thing you know, the government somehow is still surviving. Which is interesting. What the rhetoric that I'm seeing on on Facebook and just people in general are just Trump is being a big baby by shutting down the government for his wall and all this, and I'm just saying, it's funny that you like the only reason you care is because the media is pushing that narrative. Right. How many people are really affected by this shutdown?
Exactly.
Like, realistically speaking, how many people are really affected? Well, my cousin's grandpa's uncle's dad works in the FAA, and I mean, yeah.
I mean, this was the reason, and maybe our listeners didn't know this, but when Obama had it, when he did it, and again, this is government policy, and I've explained this before, that in private enterprise, when you're short on money, you cut non-essential services. You might have a tea lady who goes around with a little cart and she serves you tea, 1 or 2 sugars, right? She's the first to go, right? In private enterprise, and stuff like that. But in government, they go for the most painful thing possible.
Right.
And when it was Obama and this whole thing had happened, the first thing to go was the national parks. Mm-hmm. I think TSA and all that kind of stuff. And they had pictures of the poor Boy Scouts. They couldn't see the Washington Monument, and they traveled so far, and the humanity, these monster Republicans are just destroying the Boy Scouts, which recently filed for bankruptcy. But that's a whole other story. But why? Because that's the narrative, right? If you are a government department, you're not competing for customers like in private enterprise. You're competing for funds, right? There's a big pot of money, and every department is fighting for that slice of the government funds. And if you have something that's not important, or let's say like you've been working on the Y2K bug for the last 18 years, and you're still getting funded, which Trump actually just put a stop to, you need to prove you're essential. So how do you prove that? Is by causing as much pain as possible on the public. And when you do that, the public is the one that now steps up and says, oh, you cut our services, you cut this, or I like being molested by the TSA or whatever the case might be. And the public then lobbies the government to try and get their funding reinstated. So it's a great ploy.
You invoke the court of public opinion.
Correct. You try to get public pressure to go on. But what ends up happening, like Obama did that. He tried to put it on. I think they closed Yellowstone, Yosemite, all these. I mean, that was pretty much the worst they could do was close the parks, right? And you get pictures of crying scouts. But the longer it goes on, they realize something. The more people realize how little they're affected by the shutdown.
There was this whole volunteer group. This whole volunteer group that was cleaning up the parks.
Yeah. I saw that. I think I shared that article on Facebook where private volunteers, patriots who want to see the parks taken care of. There's nobody cleaning the parks, and they stepped up and they did it. Just out of charity.
For free.
And what ended up happening the last time this went on is the minute the shutdown was done, everybody now puts in a claim for lost revenue, lost money. And of course, they times it by 3 and they inflate it. And everybody got paid more. Right. So it's this ruse that, they're going to suffer or whatever. That's not going to happen. It's everybody will be paid. And many people are going to claim damages and other things. And the government will pay all of that off as well. So nobody's actually going to lose anything off of this thing.
But the government, so yeah, I mean that's the point I've really been trying to drive home with people who have, been having this discussion with me is like, well, you know, not so much. I'm not trying to say, the Democrats are right, the Republicans are right. I'm like, but look, how much government do we really need?
Correct. Correct.
The whole I mean, the news straight up saying, and today, the government is now closing down departments of non-essential departments. Why are they there? If they're not
Exactly.
essential. I mean, in like, I mean, even oh, what was it like? It just movies I've seen, like non-essential personnel, like Star Trek. It was always like evacuate all non-essential personnel to this part of the starship. It's like, why are they there then?
Well, I think in that was Next Generation. I think there was a scientific side, so people actually had families and stuff like that on it. So that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
I
I
guess
get
so.
that. I get
Yeah.
that. It's just always funny, like the why are they there?
No, no,
Why are they essential then?
completely agree. I wanted to draw your attention to that statement I made about the Y2K bug. Do you remember the Y2K bug? You were around for that, right?
Oh, I mean, I was there, but I didn't know about it till afterwards. I learned about it. Like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense, I guess. I mean,
And
people were crazy enough to believe it.
yeah,
Like,
it was.
then because the numbers would change from 99 to 00, like the systems would crash. And
Yeah. So what it was is a lot of the older computer systems, they would have a dating mechanism with only 2 digits for the year. So it would default to the idea that it was 1900 and something, so 1999. So you just put 99, and it would assume the 1900. So the problem was when they hit the year 2000, these older systems would clock back to zero, and in its context, it would be 1900 instead of the year 2000. So that was the big scare, and all this kinds of stuff, and all
systems would
Armageddon.
crash, the world would
Systems
burn.
crashed. Yeah, it's cats and dogs living together. I mean, just complete anarchy was predicted, right? And of course, it went off without a hitch. I remember watching it on TV from Australia. Was the first one to kick off 2000, and I watched. I think it was BBC or something, and I watched all of the from Tokyo, China, Dubai, and stuff like that. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Anyway, my point on this is again to show the uselessness of understanding government departments. Literally, the department set up to deal with the Y2K bug, which was only relevant in the last century, just got cut from the budget 18 years after the fact.
So, did you hear about this? There's a budget for even funnier. Actually, I gotta look this up quick. So you know how like the budget is, there's scientific research that gets put out there. They research these um, different whatever animals. There's
Yeah.
research projects.
Gay otters
Uh,
and breeding cycle of Tasmanian devils and, you know,
let me see here. So
rabbit season.
356,000 of our tax dollars was spent studying whether or not Japanese quail are more sexually promiscuous on cocaine.
Yes. Yes. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that like the heights of necessary spending?
Why?
There's a great segment. I don't know if they still do it. I don't get CNBC, but that was the financial channel. Well, one of the financial channels, CNBC. And they used to do a fantastic segment about pork in the federal budget. And it's all the stupid spending like that. It's the completely unnecessary waste of money that's just a pet project for some senator to send money back to his state, right?
Well, I mean, even on a state level, you get some bullshit too.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, the resources that go into creating and drafting a law, like drafting a bill to then be
Yes.
passed into law, to then be signed by a governor. So, people have to get together. Legislators come together, draft a bill. It gets talked through, debated, whatever, maybe edited a few times. Then they pass it. Then it sends to the governor, and he signs it. It is illegal in the state of Minnesota to cross the border into Wisconsin with a duck on your head.
Okay, is
Actual resources went into drafting this law.
that's fucking crazy.
It is illegal to sleep naked in Minnesota.
Is it?
Yeah.
And this is a law. I think I know there was a banking law that said you cannot apply for a mortgage, or your mortgage application has to arrive at a certain bank by horse and cart. I think it's in like one of those New England states, and like a really old law about this. I mean, you know, I guess that was like a show of opulence and security in the 1800s. But technically, every time you email your application into the bank, apparently that's illegal.
Oh my god.
It's
Yeah.
really it's crazy. It's
But
crazy.
I mean, on all levels of government, you get these laws that just kind of make you wonder, like, how much of my tax dollars are paying for this nonsense? You know?
Yeah, yeah. I'll give it to Trump on this. I think he's recently cut the financial aid to Pakistan, I think, or was it Iran? It might have been
Good.
Iran,
Good.
right? Yeah, and you know, I think he makes a valid point. These people are screaming, you know, death to America and, you know, all that stuff and burning the American flag and stuff like that. And yet you're sending them money. I understand the reason you send them money is so that they don't get money from the Russians and the Chinese. That's the old Cold War strategy of when, the world was basically divided between the Reds and the Blues, the communists and the capitalists. And so that was the strategy. You send money to these despots, and if you didn't send money, the Russians will send the money, and then they'll be communists. They'll switch to communism. So you really don't need that anymore. There isn't any communism anymore. You know, North Korea is imploded. Cuba is on the verge of collapse.
It's never been tried, so
which is true. I'll grant you that. In the same way that a full true capitalism hasn't been tried.
Did you ever,
in any extent?
Did you ever see that tweet?
Which one?
People keep saying real communism hasn't been tried.
Yeah.
And yes, they're right, because almost communism has killed millions upon millions of people, whereas almost capitalism has
brought people prosper.
has brought millions more out of poverty. So
yeah.
Yes, there hasn't been real communism, but not real communism is a lot worse than not real capitalism either. So
yes, yeah, no, fully agree. Yeah, I know the meme. And sorry. Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. I think I did my video about that. I didn't state that point about, you know, a little bit of capitalism has done a lot of good for people. But this is the point. Why are we sending aid? Even in the UK, we send aid to, you know, some pretty, you know, despicable characters out there. And they're not necessarily on our side, right? Some of these people are kind of antagonistic towards the West. And why are we still playing these games? You know, all of I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's still something, you know, just like the UN.
I mean, the only real money that I can understand, like, makes much sense, because it's actually like forcing change, is like, I mean, it's one that I've obviously kept up with, so I'm a little bit biased there, but North Korea is actually like, Kim Jong-un is actually being forced because of the aid. You know, he Pompeo, which is Secretary of State, and then Trump, they're really pushing for, like, hey, you got to start acting right, or else we're not giving you anything.
Yeah.
And the push has been basically, you have to show clear indications that you're denuclearizing completely.
Yeah.
For us to send you some money. If anything is not helping in any way, if you're going anywhere off track, no money.
Yeah. And that was the North Korean ploy. That's how North Korea stayed basically in isolation, you know, for all these years. So anytime they wanted money, they'd do a missile test. And then the West will scream and shout and, you know, get their panties in a bunch. And then they'll be like, what do you want? What do you want? And they'll pay them off. So this has been a continuing cycle for 30 years, maybe more than that.
But Trump, I mean, the war has stopped, has officially been signed as a stop
between the North and the South. Yes.
And even the gesture of North and South, you know, Kim Jong-un and the president of South Korea crossing each other's borders, kind of as a gesture to show, like,
the DMZ, the 30th parallel.
Yeah. We're making progress. And Trump really pushing to like, hey, you act up or you're done.
But I mean, there's a bigger story in that, and this is what people probably wouldn't realize, right? China is the big story in that. So China has been backing North Korea financially for years, right? So money's been flowing in from China. Anytime it wasn't enough money, of course they try to blackmail the West with their bomb threats. But basically because South Korea is allied with the United States, and China doesn't want South Korea and their weaponry from the Americans or like American bases and stuff like that right at their border. So they were willing to prop up Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il to kind of put as a buffer between them and South
sense.
Korea. So the fact that that's collapsed, and I obviously something has happened in China that we are not privy to, but I think Trump was informed about it, which is why he played hardball. It's brought an end to the war, right? He's done the right thing in terms of the deal and stuff. There's no other money coming in. He has to play ball, with the West.
Are you saying then that the grand scheme is to,
No, what I'm saying is something's happened to China.
What I'm saying is do you think that Trump's move in the bigger picture is not really North Korea but China?
No, I think Trump's move is a response to what China failed to do. And what should be concerning to all of us is why China didn't prop them up. Why didn't they give them the money that they wanted? Which kind of implies, and I think we all know what the reason is. China is headed for recession. Their debt situation is just crazy. We don't even have the real numbers. They're making shit up right now in the markets that it's so preposterous, nobody believes it. But they might actually be on the verge of some kind of recession, possibly even like financial collapse. So I don't think they have the money to prop up North Korea.
Because there's a lot of moves taking place in Asia, especially. I mean, you have the big ones are America's getting North Korea to chill out a bit, basically.
Yeah.
And Japan is bolstering up their military assets.
Correct. In response to what was North Korea, but now towards China.
And so it's changing the balance of power to basically is starting to slow down China, and just so I wonder if a lot of the move, the general direction is to move towards a weakened communist China, or at least a less of a threat. Japan keeping them in check, North Korea not really being propped up by them, and South Korea, of course, staying strong with an American backing.
Yeah. China's military position is not strong in Asia anymore, right? So Japan is their biggest threat. They know it's the Japanese, right? And of course, the Hawaii is a little more, out. So that's like the closest U.S. presence, which apart from the bases in South Korea. And this was the problem. This was the chess game that they were playing. So Kim Jong-il was firing rockets over Japan. And remember, we saw all the videos of people getting alerts, and television turns on. There's a missile over the country and stuff. So Japan's response is to militarize to defend itself against North Korea, right? That money's already been spent, and I made a lot of money, backing Lockheed Martin in the stock exchange, and before that was even announced, and then I made quite a bit of money off that. But now North Korea's gone. So who's the next biggest bad man in Asia that those weapons can be used against? It's China. Japan's not going to go after New Zealand. Unfortunately, nobody cares about New Zealand, right? So who is next on the chopping block in Asia?
China.
It's China. I don't think it's going to be an all-out war. I don't think that the Japanese do not have the gumption to do that anymore. But I think the economic situation might be interesting to the point where we might see a fracture. And you and I have kind of discussed this a bit, a fracture in China, probably between the North and the South.
Yeah, definitely. With they've maintained Macau and Hong Kong as these sort of little capitalist zones to keep the money flowing.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, that's not going to just stay there. You know, it can spread.
And it has.
You
I mean,
have Beijing.
Shenzhen and Beijing. Yeah.
I mean, Beijing are just little areas like that, but I mean, you know, but then Beijing is also the the capital.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, there's
And they built the bridge. They actually built the motorway connecting mainland China to Macau and to Hong Kong. Right. And it's very convoluted. And I think it's like, it's worse than a TSA screening and molestation to get onto the road, and you're only allowed so many cars, and you need 3 different insurance, and it's very, very complicated.
right. But
yeah.
Almost like Taiwan doesn't really matter that much.
I mean, let's not get into that. That's a complicated issue.
No, I know. I brought that in because I'm like, gee, I don't hear much about Taiwan going on about this.
I think China has its hands full.
Well, yeah, they've got their hands full. Especially they have a democracy movement rising in Hong Kong. I don't know if you know about that.
I know. Yes, in the last election, the China from the mainland tried to influence the election or something like that.
There's something, but there's similar to the Yellow Vest movement. They have a Yellow Umbrella movement.
Okay, interesting.
That is basically pushing towards a more democratic Hong Kong, and censorship from China, and the crackdown is definitely pushing a bit.
It's the losing battle.
The start of that movement in 2008. A lot of their leaders and such have been arrested and are now receiving their final sentences.
Okay.
So for anyone wondering, I do I do a weekly news roundup on Think Liberty, think-liberty.com. So if you guys look up the Asia news roundup, I do some stuff. I've been touching on a couple of those things. So, but Brexit.
Yeah, I'll get into this very quickly. The vote for the Brexit bill that Theresa May has put forward, I believe it's this week. I believe so. I might be off by a couple of days or so, but I know it's very, very soon. Last I checked, I think it's tomorrow, the 14th. I don't think it's going any later than the 15th. And as I've explained to our listeners before, the deal is terrible. It basically means that we have all of the obligation. The UK as a whole has all of the obligations to the EU, the money, the resources, access to our fishing waters for every other nation to fish our fish, and all that good stuff. And we get no more representation in the parliament, which means we can't veto anything. We're basically subject to all of the laws and regulations in the EU until the end of what they call is the backstop. Now, the issue with the backstop is that it has to do with Northern Ireland. Now, Ireland is an island. The Republic of Ireland is the country. And then Northern Ireland is a province, which is part of the UK. So there are 2 countries on the island of Ireland, right? So there's the Republic of Ireland and there's Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland is part of the UK, which is Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So basically 2 countries sharing one island, one is about to get independence, right? So this is causing a problem. One remains in the EU, one is not, and there's no hard border. You can cross that border like nothing. You get on the train, you arrive in Belfast in Northern Ireland, you jump on the train and you go straight into Dublin. There's nothing. There's no stop. It's treated like one country. But this, of course, causes a problem for the EU because people can now import cheaper goods to Northern Ireland and then just smuggle it into the country, right? Because the EU is basically a protectionist racket. So the EU has basically said they're not going to let us go in this deal, in Theresa May's deal. They're not going to let us leave until we solve that issue. And also included in the language of this thing is we cannot leave unilaterally by ourselves. Both parties need to agree to an amicable leaving, which basically locks us into the EU. And they just never have to agree, and we're stuck, right? We do not have legal authority to leave the EU if we sign this agreement. So anyway, the long and short of it is it's dead in the water. Nobody in their right mind, none of the remainers who want to stay in the EU or the leavers, nobody's voting for this thing. It's DOA, dead on arrival. So the only option that is left is a no-deal Brexit, which is We basically unilaterally leave by an act of parliament. We rescind the Communities Act, and we just deal with every individual issue as it comes up, like every other country on the earth. We got immigrants. We'll deal with them through our immigration department and give them residency or citizenship or whatever. We can trade with the EU on WTO terms. And for every trade agreement that the EU has negotiated on, on behalf of people, for themselves and us, with people like Japan and these other places, we just go to them and say, well, look, nothing has to change. If you like the deal that you had with the EU, we'll just continue it like that. And that becomes our new trade deal. And that could be done in months. So that's the only option that seems left. The problem is that the Remainers, the people who do not want to leave the EU, which is pretty much the all of Parliament, including our Prime Minister, as well as the Speaker of the House. We call him Speaker of the House. They seem to be plotting a coup to sabotage the government from being able to raise any more taxes if they go with the option of no Brexit. They literally passed in Parliament a piece of legislation saying that they limit the government's ability to raise taxes unless they come up with a deal. So they're trying to strong arm. Now, for me as a libertarian, I don't give a shit. You don't want to raise taxes? That's fine with me. Still give me no deal. It doesn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. But they're trying every which way they can to sabotage it, push for a second referendum, all sorts of tactics. Because the EU is the biggest political gravy train for these people. In the UK, when you served in government, after a certain amount of time and they wanted to get rid of you, they kicked you up to the House of Lords, which is like your Senate. We have the House of Lords, right? Which is a cushy job, £300 a day, food allowance, all kinds of expense accounts and stuff like that. And I don't even know how many lords there are at this point. It's quite ridiculous. But then even higher than that, if you wanted an even bigger payoff, they kicked you up to the EU, where you were making ridiculous money, unlimited expense accounts, like down to your Viagra was subsidized, just absolute gravy train of money. And there's you never have to answer the public because you're so far removed from the electorate. So people who want power and money and no accountability, the EU was their dream.
Right.
And now us leaving threatens all of these politicians and bureaucrats who've been dreaming, creaming over the idea of working and retiring with an EU benefits package.
Nonsense.
It is. So, it hasn't been resolved yet. The vote is this week. It's getting nasty. And you could literally see the breakup of the UK over this issue. If it is they push for a second referendum, it's the end of democracy because it means voting doesn't matter. We voted for Brexit. We didn't get Brexit. You're not allowed to ask for another democratic decision unless you deliver that which was promised. It'd be like all the Bernie or the Hillary people, after Trump gets elected, say we don't like the results. Instead of waiting the allotted time, 4 years, 2020, to wait for whoever else to run again, they just call another election. And say, well, what would happen before you actually got the president? What would happen? That means voting doesn't matter. Exactly. And it's quite disturbing what's going on with that at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. That's
yeah.
Parliament really is sovereign, right?
Yeah, that is basically sums up the Constitution of the UK. Now, I have a friend out here. His name is Dave. He's with the Greens. Works very actively in this community. He and I agree on nothing, right? But every time I see him, we have drinks. We sit and talk. We don't talk politics amongst each other and stuff like that. But he's working very hard and stuff like that. And he is a Remainer. He believes that we should stay in the EU and stuff like that. And I asked him why. And as of yet, he hasn't given me, they all say there are lots of reasons, but I haven't seen any. Even when, well, right. It's because I'm a racist, xenophobe, homophobe, all the phobias. So even when this is the heights of stupidity, right? So even the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, he has just spent, I don't know how many thousands of pounds to produce a documentary or something like that giving all of the reasons why we should remain in the EU. But here's my problem with that. They did that already before the vote, right? Before the vote, they tried to put forward all of the arguments that they could, including all of the fear mongering and the sky is falling and, we're all going to run out of food and water and we're all going to catch super gonorrhea and, the dead will come back to life and start eating our brains. I mean, they literally threw everything they could at us and none of it stuck. And now they think they're going to come up with new reasons. These people, I haven't heard one good reason why we should remain in the EU. And as for my friend Dave, when I tell him that and he waffles on about, we need the EU and, free travel, he could retire in Spain and all this other kinds of stuff. The truth is I could retire anywhere. If I have the money, I can get a visa and go anywhere. None of these things that these people are talking about are exclusive to the EU. The US is not in the EU and people from America do these things all the time. So yeah, it's quite ridiculous.
Now, okay, so Jesus, I mean, all this time of Brexit and then it's just not going to happen.
It has to happen. It would literally be like if Trump got elected after the whole due process and everything, and then somehow the Democrats weaseled some way to keep him from being president. What do you think would happen? Yeah. I mean, we don't have guns in the US, right?
You have butter knives.
We got butter knives and swords and horseshoes. So it's not gonna be as epic as like an American Revolution, but I think there would be some serious riots.
The streets would run brown with tea.
like how you said, if there was a protest last week regarding the IRS and your tax return, you would join the protest if it. If there's a call for another referendum, I will go and join that, because that is, we know democracy is really dead in this country. It's been dead forever, but at least put up the pretense, which is like part of being British, show face, save face with the whole thing. But then by doing this, I think it could get very ugly, very, very ugly.
Brooks getting all collapsitarian here.
Yeah. We're going to hit that Rothbard button, man. It's going down.
But we wanted to touch on all this at least to stay within talking about those topics. But one of the things we had a whole conversation, like over an hour of us
over an hour
before that. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about last week. We talked year in review and kind of talking about our goals and such. But what we've been talking a lot about kind of the goals. I know Brooke has been wanting to get back to the gym. I am trying to get there to begin with. But we're talking a lot about like kind of the red pill stuff. We've been starting to incorporate more into the show, as well as just it's kind of our new direction, I guess. At least for me, it's kind of the new direction with just things I talk about. For those of you who remember last few weeks ago, so Christmas Eve, we did our show on the Rational Male book by Rollo Tomasi. And part of the base, what's known as the manosphere, which is the, it's the community of men where they discuss anything from dating to relationships to intergender dynamics, as we talked about, as well as self-improvement, masculinity. It's kind of the amalgamation of just manhood, I would say. And among people, Rollo Tomasi tends to be one of the guys that are kind of a part of that. The if you want to call them one of the patriarchs of that community,
the Godfather,
the Godfather of the red pill, people like to call him. One of the guys, Richard Cooper, who runs the YouTube channel Entrepreneur in Cars. He's kind of I'd say he's kind of like among these red pill guys. He's kind of the social media guy because he actually has a lot of I mean, he's got the big channel. He's got the big influence in that way. Like him and Anthony Johnson are kind of up there in terms of the social media side, like actually having that internet presence. So part of late last year, I got involved with this Richard Cooper has a men's community, or he used to call it the men's, kind of his men's tribe or men's community. Basically, he formed a secret Facebook group for people who watch his videos. He mentions it every time. Basically, you pay a certain amount per month to be part of this group, where there's basically a whole spectrum of men, anywhere from guys who are just working regular jobs, wanting to improve their game, self-improvement, such like that, to guys who are in the upper actual entrepreneurs making money, actually gaming women and stuff, and they actually will offer help. So he says in the group, it's kind of like, it's a kind of a give take group, or share. You're sharing one bit and you're asking a question in the next post. So there's a lot of feedback you get from that group. So I've joined that group, and that's kind of what's helped with me in that group is connections, as well as just it's a good place to drop feedback on things, whether it's a lot of guys will do like field reports. I know I've been experimenting a little bit with like online dating kind of stuff, so I'll share like screenshots of chats and stuff. Did I approach this right? Did I approach that right? Last night I had a Tinder match, and I shared that, like, did I do it right? I found out that I was trying to engage in too high a level instead of just going with the basics. Trying to play a move that just was kind of you're thinking too much, you're trying too hard, go with the basics. So that's part of, I guess, we talked about self-improvement. Actually, what are some of our goals? I liked the saying "fuck bitches, get money," but we're kind of flipping that this year. It's get money then fuck bitches. So before all the women start to scream and blow their heads up, settle down. We don't hate women.
I mean, this is the thing. Yeah, I mean, Richard Cooper. Like, I think I discovered Richard Cooper the year I came out here to the UK, and I was on that whole trip. I was all about, I came to the UK. I wanted to, be a better version of myself. I wanted to, begin self-improvement, started reading, or well, at least listening to audiobooks. I don't really, have time to sit down and do nothing, and somehow I stumbled across Richard Cooper. And I used to tell people, I think I told Amos that, like, he was my new dad at the time when I first discovered
the weirdest thing.
It was. I mean, he's not that much older than me either, but it's just that he had, and I mean, I think you'd admit that he has the dad energy, right? He has that kind of fathering side to him,
but not the dad bod.
No, I'm not going to comment on that. But anyway,
well,
yeah.
No, real quick. So one of the things in the manosphere that's talked about a lot more recently, especially for the guys who are older and like in their late 40s, is what's known as TRT, which is testosterone replacement therapy. Basically, guys who are starting to experience the early stages of just low testosterone. I mean, it's not even simply for guys who are young, like older. A lot of younger men are struggling with it. It's just the diet, the food we eat, the environment we're in nowadays tends not to promote high testosterone. Yeah. So I'll just state one of the things that Richard had posted in the group was just a picture of he was wearing a shirt, kind of a superhero t-shirt with like a Captain America shield on it, and he just kind of did like kind of showing a full flex. The guy is like approaching 50, gray in his beard, but he's got like a full, he's built like he could be in his 20s. So it's basically, it takes over your testosterone your naturally produced testosterone and gives you, it's replacement. You're replacing it with testosterone to boost your testosterone again. So kind of bring you back to the testosterone levels of an early 20-year-old guy. Building muscle, having that, sex drive again and such. So he was just kind of showing like the results of his TRT that he's been on. He really advocates for that being, that's, those are his peers, older guys struggling with that testosterone. So that's why I said, and he really pushes for that, he's really much against the dad bod thing, like women that claim, I like the dad bod, basically it's the lanky look, the husky, like unhealthy husky look. It's just
yeah, not built, but just not fat either. Just kind of yeah. I mean, yeah, you got to ask chicks what the dad bod is. I don't look at,
I mean, yeah. So then that's why I said, he's got the dad energy without the dad bod. So
I mean, because I did a blood test. I know my testosterone is on the low end, but what the guy told me, it's basically fat loss, right? The biggest killer of testosterone is visceral fat. So, I mean, since being on the carnivore diet and stuff like that, now they say the carnivore diet reduces testosterone as well. So I'll have to do another test. I haven't noticed any decrease in anything. In fact, I think I'm doing pretty good. But I want to get the other test to see if there's been any change. But yeah, I don't know. Because even before I was taking an oral testosterone. So sorry, when I was diagnosed with well, people who don't know this, but early of 2017, I was in the hospital from a really bad bacterial infection, and as a result of that, I had like some nerve damage. It wasn't going to be permanent, but it's going to last for a little while. And I talked about how like my joints would hurt and stuff like that because I had this thing called Julian Barr, which it was just tremendous pain. But eventually, the body works through it and stuff like that. But as a result, I got some nerve damage, and I was like, okay, I'm struggling, sexually and otherwise. And they said, all right, it's temporary. So they put me on, I think they put me on Cialis and something called Proviron, which is an oral testosterone. And oh my God, that was a lot of fun. Like, right. I think I was pretty much close to the max. I think you're not supposed to take more than like 150 milligrams a day. And I was doing that. It's like 4 tablets. And oh my God, it was trippy. It was really trippy. But it's not good.
Like you're high on weed, trippy?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, I wasn't high on weed, but I just had just all that energy and that confidence, and like my mood improved. There was a lot that was going on. It's not good to do it long term because
you're wanting to just fuck everything you saw.
Right. I mean, a good breeze would pass and I'd probably get an erection. It was that kind of thing. So it was great. And I'm very candid about that.
What kind of clothes are you wearing in public, Brook?
I didn't go out in public often. But it's not good to take long term because your liver has to process it, and it's a whole complicated thing. And then this other doctor, he said, why are you taking that? You should try something. Oh, what was it called? Clomiphene or something like that. Now, clomiphene is actually, it has an estrogen component as well as a testosterone component, but it boosts your natural testosterone kind of thing. So I think like women take it if they're trying to get pregnant, and men take it as well because it it boosts their sperm count and all this other kinds of stuff. That was good as well. Not as good as the Proviron, but it was definitely interesting. And I hear there's a drug company that's working on kind of getting rid of the estrogen component. So it's like just the testosterone side of it, which would probably be really good. And then the third option, of course, was injections, right? You could go for like monthly. Yeah, well, the TRT, right? So you go for I think it's like monthly. You go and they inject you with basically testosterone. And you take some other supplements as well, I think.
From what I remember, they said it was like you had an initial set of injections to kind of get your body transitioning over to this new treatment. And then you follow up, you start to get weekly injections that you can administer on your own.
Right. That's probably what it is. I didn't know if it was weekly or monthly, but yeah, that was kind of it. But yeah, and I've seen it. There is this one doctor, I can't remember his name right now, but he was like 75, and if he like built like a tank, like the guy was ripped. And I mean, it was obvious that he was doing, testosterone replacement and all this other kinds of stuff.
Which is better than steroids. You gotta admit.
Oh yeah, no. And this is it. Like the problem with low testosterone, and guys, if you're out there, you should check on this, because as Amos says, it has nothing to do with you or your age. It's just the environment. Like overall, testosterone is lower because of pollution and all this other thing. So it doesn't make you less of a man or any shit like that. But it's good to check these things.
Just don't grow tits.
But yeah, if that's the issue, guys, you should get that sorted out. And like as I say, it helps with adding muscle mass, strength, mood, libido, everything. I mean, it could contribute to some hair loss as well, but they've got stuff for that also. But and if otherwise you start to develop man tits, and you could start putting on weight, you get weaker, depression. So a lot of these things that people are taking drugs for might actually just be low T. So put that out there as a PSA, right?
Yeah. So, and we are not medical professionals. We got to say that. It's just from experience and people we've talked to, and things we're seeing. I mean, I am no position to ever have. Well, I should say ever to have to take it anytime soon for me.
Yeah, you got lots of time. I'm not in a position either, but probably in a couple of years, maybe that might change.
Yeah,
once I cross 40.
Right. So, but yeah, I mean, part of that self-improvement. So yeah, yeah, part of his group. So, I mean, he's popping in there a couple times a week to for feedback on some posts, whether he'll kind of like drop a like or drop a comment somewhere on things, because he's also got other things he's working on. But that's part of it too. I mean, I've definitely, since the end of last year, I've kind of upped my, if you want to say, intake of just content in general, watching anything from Rollo Tomasi's videos to keeping up with now I just subscribe to Ryan Stone, who's one of the moderators of the Married Red Pill. So he talks, I mean, he specializes in more kind of marriage and long-term relationships and stuff, but he also just does a lot of basics. So he just did a video the other day about cooking pho, which is the Vietnamese sort of noodles and soup, with shit testing. I think it is, yeah. He basically called it pho and faux, FAUX.
Right.
He did something on like alpha and beta and salsa. He did another one on. I mean, he makes basically a wide variety of just food. So he's teaching guys how to cook, because cooking is definitely a very good seductive technique, but also kind of incorporating little sort of, as we called back when we were preachers, little nuggets, little bits to kind of get you to kind of chew on in terms of the red pill, like just concepts to look into. So I'm watching his stuff, and of course every week I'm watching the Red Man group, which is basically it was the 21 convention guys, a lot of the guys in the manosphere. So you had Rollo Tomasi, which we mentioned, Richard Cooper, you had Anthony Johnson, who was the founder of the 21 convention. So he's in there.
Socrates.
This guy, Socrates, not so much. He's mainly at the convention. He'll maybe pop in once in a long while on the actual show. You had what's his name? I mean, you've got this guy Jonathan from Modern Life Dating. He's a guy that does a lot of dating coaching and stuff, and he lives in Japan, so he'll pop on every now and then. You've got Donovan Sharp from the Sharp Reality. He's kind of like if I had to like if it was like a military unit, like kind of, they say the Avengers, but if like it was like the A-Team or something and they had specialties, like Rollo would be kind of like a sharpshooter, like way in the back, like just kind of, but also kind of a commanding person. Whereas you had like Cooper's probably like a front man in like the unit, like he's the frontline guy. And then you would have, I mean, different guys with different things. Like Donovan Sharp would have to be like a Mr. T character with a giant shotgun, because he's just everything. All just the way he talks about concepts is very like just kind of
Blunt.
just blunt. It's shotgun, big black guy going around just taking out multiple targets. So they all have like just the way they approach has a lot of different tactics. I mean, the way they go about it. Ryan is kind of walking through. Ryan Stone is one of the guys too. He's walking through the different mindsets. He can call out and see psychologically a lot of different thought processes people have. Like there was a guy, so they do a call-in segment of the show, and some guy called in and said, hey, I'm really new to the red pill and I'm kind of getting it, but I mean, I'm still like, I'm having a hard time with like trying to simplify it all because I'm thinking too much. So then like, they're starting to kind of get into the question, and Ryan just jumps in. Are you afraid of loss? What? And he goes, yeah. Are you afraid of loss? Because like, have you like losing people, losing things? Well, yeah. And he goes, I guess. He goes, yeah, because you got to stop that. Like you're afraid of the losses, your things you're losing about yourself. You feel you're losing it. He goes, all it has to do with is you're thinking too long term. You're probably afraid you're coming across a girl and you're trying to use your red pill knowledge on her, and you're afraid you'll lose her because you'll do it wrong. He goes, forget that. Live in the moment. Go moment to moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good advice.
The time, the pain, the stuff, that sting, it passes. You get past it. Move on to the next girl. So he's like instantly knowing what's going on in this guy's mind. Like, why is he thinking this way? And just like cuts right through it.
That's a big one. I think even for me, the biggest transition has been, the fear of failure has been like a big issue in my life for a long time, because that's been a mindset that family and friends have been kind of pushing on me for a while. And this is what I think is definitely needed in terms of, like, even when you read Rollo's book, there's no clear defined way to kill the beta, right? To let the alpha arise. In fact, this great debate as to like what alpha actually is, right? So it's not.
You pointed out like, dude, what's your thing with this whole alpha thing? And I'm like,
yeah, what question.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, like every so often Amos will send me a snippet or a picture, and he'll comment, oh, this person is acting alpha, this person is acting beta, and he's reminiscing about some of his family and other people and stuff. And it's funny. I enjoy it. It's good banter, but I'm kind of like, okay, where is this going? Like, is there like a purpose to this?
Not even just where is it going? Where does it come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. And I basically just point out, like, I mean, it's when you realize how beta you were, there's a lot of angles you could look at, a lot of perspectives, just guys that, it comes out in some, it may not be like literally you hate yourself, but you're overcompensating.
Right.
So I'll overcompensate by, oh, look at me. I can like see this picture and really know what's going on. And it's like, but it's all in my head.
Yeah.
I'm not actually doing anything. Like what is this? How is this actually going to help me? If I can look at a picture and totally be spot on with my analysis about who's alpha, who's beta, the body language and all this, great.
Now
then what? Yeah. Exactly. Then what does that do? It's like, now you can do that if you're helping people to kind of understand it. Like if you're more coming from a teaching position, like, I mean, these guys in the Red Man group, they're all coaching and helping guys. They speak at these, conventions. Great. But for a guy like me, I need to focus on actually doing it and gaining those experiences,
Correct.
We talked about how, like, I've looked back on my dad and I try to like pull, I'm grasping at the little bits of pieces that I see, like, oh, my dad was like this and he had these alpha characteristics, and well, why does that matter? I mean, it matters, but it also kind of doesn't for where I am.
Sure. I mean, there's nothing, as I say, there's nothing wrong with any of that. And I mean, I don't do it to your level, but I notice it as well. I try to notice it in myself. And as I say, even Rollo Tomasi says it, there are times that he even falls into like the completely blue-pilled, beta thing and stuff, because he's married with kids. So, I mean, look, nobody's got this completely figured out, right? And we don't have a way to really kill the beta, sorry.
You're saying the guy who wrote the book on it doesn't have a grasp on it?
No, he does, but he says he does slip back into being a beta, right? So my point is, you could have the knowledge like you do and myself, but we can't always pull it off all the time, and that's the key. What good is the knowledge if you're not going to apply it? How ironic! That's what we used to preach.
I mean, I'm not making any grand claims or anything like I'm so whatever, but just the way I've wired myself, so to speak, the way I talk when I get a hold of a concept and I start really thinking about it and I run through the concepts and I talk to enough people, I read up on it enough, I could I could preach it, so to speak, but I could have zero experience to back those claims.
Yeah.
If I have these conversations with people and then, about red pill concepts, and then they'll come, oh my, hey, that actually made sense like that. And I feel like, man, I could actually like do something. It's like, no, I can't. No, you don't. Cause then you become a bit of a hypocrite. She'll look very much a hypocrite because I mean, in some of our background, we preached, the people I had worked with. So just between Brook and I, Brook remembers when I was in Texas and I was working for a specific ministry who had some, let's just say, more grand claims, and the theology behind it and the things behind it. I could preach about that, even though I had never done any of those things.
Right.
And I actually did.
There is a video with you preaching out there somewhere on their website, isn't there?
No, actually, I've tried finding it. It's not there anymore.
Oh, okay, man.
It's probably on a hard drive somewhere.
Fair enough.
But it's just
what you're saying there about doing the work. I think that's one of Richard Cooper's shirts, isn't it? Like, do the work or something.
Yeah.
And both you and I think we recognize, at least for me. So this year, I want to deal with some personal stuff that I've shared with Amos, and he knows what's going on in that department. But in my personal life, this year, I want to sort out my money. I'm in a good position. I want to be in a great position by the end of the year. And getting back in the gym is definitely part of it. And it's a different strategy because I've done the carnivore diet and I've lost quite a bit of weight. I'm not satisfied with it. I don't see a major difference because I see myself every day, but people are kind of commenting on it now, which is fine. But I've always gone to the gym to lose weight, so it was a lot of cardio and light weights, high reps, that kind of stuff. So now I get to lift heavy weights and try and bulk up a little bit because I don't want to lose too much size. I don't want to get skinny. So, I mean, that's definitely a goal for me. And I also want to decide what I'm doing in terms of where I want to live. At the end of the year, it's a good possibility I might want to buy a place. I have to decide where I want to do that. As well as this year, I told you as well, I'm getting my driver's license. Now, it's not to say that I can't drive. I had a driver's license back in Trinidad and Tobago. But living in London, you never need one. The transportation is fantastic. Right. There's buses every 10 minutes, the subways every 2 minutes, all that kind of stuff. But now that I'm out here in Essex, I'm just north of London. I gotta get a license, right? So like there are meetups in Essex and stuff with the libertarians and other groups and stuff. I just got to get a car. So I mean, those are just a few of the things. I've also been kind of working on my wardrobe, not too much because I'm still in the weight loss phase, which I would love to talk to Donovan about that because he had this kind of the same experience because he used to be a very heavy guy. And like of all the guys in the red group, I mean, Richard Cooper's my dad. Well, I not anymore, but he was. And the one who I like most of all after that is Donovan. Donovan is a riot. He and I are like, we have that kind of thing going on. That kind of sometimes that raw energy that comes out. I really appreciate guys like that.
You got to try to call in the Red Man group or call into his show.
I'll see what I can do. I don't know if I have the time because it's an odd hour. Because he's in Vegas or something. Where is he?
Shit. Where is he?
I think he's in California. So it's a little odd on the timing.
they're all over the place. I mean,
Yeah, they are. They are.
he said he was going on a little vacation. He's taking his girlfriend out to Atlantic City.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
he lived in Vegas for a while. That was kind of, I mean, that's where he pretty much got like his, the grunt work of the game. Just all the game he practiced was in Vegas because he said it's
Unlimited supply.
yeah, because women are flying in and flying out. Like, just you're never gonna see the same people. I mean, if you're doing it right, it's just you're never gonna see the same chick twice.
Yeah, yeah. A tourist spot is great. You go to Dominican Republic, you go. I'm sure even parts of Miami, Florida, but you got to speak Spanish. Like who's the guy in Japan?
Jonathan.
Jonathan, right? Japan is tricky.
He speaks a little Japanese. From my understanding. So, because I do interact with him on a very basic level on Instagram. Instagram is where he does all his stuff,
Yeah, I've seen
pictures,
this stuff.
videos,
Modern
and
life dating.
right. So he'll post like a Instagram story, and I'll comment on something, and usually, I mean, there's a couple times I'll like catch something he posted, and it's it might strike a little like I might stick out a little more because I'll notice something that maybe he noticed, or like a handful of people will notice. Like one, he was in so he visited Wyoming, and I think he said his girlfriend was with. What's interesting is a lot of these guys, they cannot show who their girlfriend is because I'm sure like the hate will just, someone's gonna dox them,
Right.
So he was with his girlfriend, and they found some company truck parked somewhere in some town, and it was called Manco, Manko, Manco something Industries,
Okay.
or whatever. In Japanese, manko is the slang term for pussy or vagina. And
Awesome.
but he just like he takes his camera out and he's just like, haha, this is so funny, guys. And then he's like, if you speak Japanese, you totally get it. And then like, so I just like reply to the Instagram story. I get it. He goes, you know what it means? I said, yeah, it means pussy, right? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, no. And I asked him, I was like, because knowing a little bit about languages, I'm like, is that the proper term? Or is that the slang term? Like saying vagina and pussy. He says, oh, it's the slang term. Said, oh, okay, cool. So I told him, kind of had the small conversation. Well, I speak Chinese. And so I kind of understand like Asian languages have a little bit that difference and all that anyway. So he came through Minnesota, but only like stayed at the airport. So I'm like sitting there, I'm for my job, couldn't go. I'm like, God dang it, try to like meet up with a guy like him because he presents himself as like a younger guy.
Yeah,
but he's older than Anthony Johnson. Anthony Johnson's only 30. Anthony looks older because of the beard.
Right. So how old is he?
Probably like 33, I'd say.
Oh, that's not too bad.
But yeah, so Anthony's actually the youngest guy because Anthony had he had the 21 convention, under 21. He started when he was 17,
Yeah.
So the dude's still a lot younger.
So the question is that everybody's burning to know is, are you going to the 21 convention?
The plan is yes.
Which one?
Well, the one in November in Miami.
Okay.
What do you mean, which one?
Well, remember they just made the announcement about the other one.
Oh, the one in the spring?
Yeah.
No, can't make. I mean, at first, that one's not for me. That's for fathers and married guys.
Right.
And then they have one in Poland, which is mainly just for the Europeans because they have a huge European following. So they're doing that. So I would just go to the main one in November.
Right.
So,
do you know how much the tickets are?
Probably $2,500. There are huge, but there are huge discounts early on. So,
okay, that's good.
Like being part of Richard Cooper's group, he has the ability to, because he'll be a speaker, obviously. Right. He has the ability to hand out discounts, like huge discounts on tickets.
Okay.
And there are ways to if you if he sees that you're really serious about going, there's other ways you can, like, you're not like paying it all up front. Maybe there's a payment plan, maybe there's whatever. It's a pretty spendy thing, but I think the value is definitely worth it.
Right. Right.
Um, they're paying for a lot. They have a lot of speakers. There's also events you're paying for. There's just the huge production value behind, a lot of the stuff they're putting behind it to produce like the content coming out of it. I've
Yeah.
seen the video content they put out. It's good quality video. It's a full blown conference. It's just such a small thing because there's so few guys that go to it. It's the the money that's put into the content produced as a result of it is so much more. Like the ratio of how many guys are going versus how much quality they're putting forth.
Right.
They could do a conference for thousands of guys.
Right.
And it would still be good quality.
Right.
That's how much more back end stuff they're putting into versus how many people are actually going. You get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
like
I get what you're saying.
Like you could take, like if you're putting, money for, we could talk like mega churches having thousands of people and the equipment they put in. But imagine the same equipment with half the people.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah,
it's more, and to be fair, that's what you want. You don't want these groups to be too big. So I'm sure, as I saw, that there's a limit on how many seats were available.
Yeah.
So I regret that I missed the Poland one. I probably would have gone to that because Poland is like,
no, it's coming up.
Yeah, but I think it's sold out.
Oh, well, never mind then.
Yeah, double check it for me, because if it is still available, I'll see if I could actually fly out there. But yeah. So as I was saying, like if you want to take the mega church ability, it's so high, it's so easy to hide in like these big settings and stuff like that. And like you and I both know, when working with groups, you want intimate, smaller groups so that people could get all the help and get all their questions answered and stuff like that. So being bigger, having more people doesn't always equate with, a better experience.
Right. Here we go. 21 Convention, Poland. Oh, they're not selling tickets for it yet, it looks like.
Do they have a date for it?
Let's see here. Twitter.
No, it's not saying. We don't have to look for it on air. We'll just get back to me when you can. If I can't make it out to the one in Florida, because I'd love to come out with you. And
I see.
Here
we go. 2019 Poland tickets will go on sale at 21 Convention 2018 to attendees. So any European attendees that were at the 21 Convention last year. A few months later, it will go public. And he posted this tweet in September. So it's probably going to be in the next month or two here. He'll post about that. But that's okay. Yeah, you said you'd rather probably come to this one, the one that's here in the States. The best country in the world.
That's up for debate, man. I wouldn't mind meeting some Polish girls, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Because I'm always looking to connect with like different guys, good men out here, alpha men, people making money, serious about it. Because I look at some of the friends I have here, since I've come out here, I've lost all my friends, right? So I got to make new friends. Some of them are great, and some of them I'm really worried about. Like,
gee, Brooke, what is this obsession with alpha men?
It's because I've got nobody to challenge me. Like, you need that. You need. You said that was kind of a big part of being in the group, getting that feedback. You've even connected with a few people, and you've had some conversations.
Yeah. So I've actually connected with one guy that lives here in Minnesota. Awesome. I think we're the only guys in the group from Minnesota. So, one guy's from Minnesota, but not around here.
Right.
But this guy is actually from Minnesota. So, cool. We've connected, and we've been having actually weekly talks, just talking over. It's really just like bantering, just bullshitting, talking about stuff.
Right.
But it is, we do incorporate little bits of like, okay, I watched this video and I thought about this and we talked about that. So, so he's wanting to get into the red pill, basically producing red pill content.
Right.
Which is another thing that Richard Cooper is pushing for. So I've connected up with some guys that are all wanting to, whether they're going to produce a blog, do videos, or whatever they want to do.
I mean, I hope we're getting some good subscribers from all these groups that you're in. Are you like promoting your stuff? And
I'll share it here and there.
yeah, I mean, you could share this video because I mean, we're promoting their stuff, so I'm sure they'd appreciate the endorsement.
Oh yeah. So, so yeah, we're definitely trying to get connected with all that. It's just go ahead.
I want to say one thing about this. Like I was considering joining the group, and then he raised the price. Right. And at the time, so I'm a trader. I need, my equipment and stuff like that. And this year I have to buy some pretty expensive software. And at the original price, it was, I can knock that out in a year. At the new price, I might have to give up on like live option data from the New York Stock Exchange to kind of, meet my budget requirements. If I were to join. And it's kind of like join the group, live option data to make money. That's
money.
And I did tell you I'm thinking about it because, if they had like a yearly deal, if there's like, okay, you buy a year and you get, 10% off or 20% off or whatever, I probably would have done that. Right. Because at least I'd reduce my overall overhead. I'm trying to stick within my budget. Most of my money is invested. So I have to live within a certain, means. Right. So yeah. But I mean, if it was at the original price, I would have been in there already. So I'm still thinking about it. And I would love to go to the convention in Florida. I will more than likely go to the one in Poland because I've always wanted to go to Poland, and the girls out there are hot. And yeah, it sounds like it'll be a great place to, connect with guys and play some game.
Yeah. But yeah, we were going to talk about, so, we're talking about these goals we have set. I mean, one of the things I'm looking into is definitely investing. So trying to, not just to like save up money for the money's sake, but save up, like actually have some cash, but also have some things tied up in certain investments. I know I showed Brooke some of the things some small, but important moves I've started to make towards that. So that's just good. But it's over the new year. So New Year's Eve, I went out to my hometown and I met up with, I mentioned this. Yeah. Met up with, I was going to see if there was any classmates or something just to see, if I'd meet up with anyone, kind of shoot the shit. Like, hey, what's everyone up to since high school? Met one guy who was in the military and now he works a job. And I started talking about just, he was talking about politics. I kind of, joined him a bit on that. Having a couple beers, talking, and somehow got to feminism and single moms and such. And I started stating a couple of things that were very specific to just showing like who I'm talking about, like what I'm talking about. So I started talking about like responsibility and authority. And he like, once he heard that, he kind of gave me like that side eye, like, who are you listening to? And I basically mentioned, he said, do you subscribe to red pill content? And I said, yes. And I said, have you read The Rational Male? He said, yes. So kind of start talking. He would be considered MGTOW because he listens to a lot of Turd Flinging Monkey. So we talked about this. I said, well, I watch a lot of Rollo Tomasi, who was on the Red Man group, and I want to go to the 21 convention and such. So, which is where we could see like there's different kinds of MGTOWs. There's going what I consider like the high level MGTOW, or as like Donovan Sharp will call like the low level MGTOWs. Low level MGTOWs are guys that MGTOWs for not trying. High level MGTOWs are guys who have tried but want to remain MGTOW. So the difference, and we wanted to kind of touch on this quick, the difference between there's kind of three different guys in the red pill sphere. I don't want to say community because some of them, I mean, there's offshoots. So in red pill thought, if you want to call it, just the conversation, intergender dynamics, knowing about female nature, society, marriage law, family law, all these things, kind of the red pill of the world for men. What is it going to be like for us in our environment? Marriage is probably, what are the good what are the odds of actually doing well in a marriage, having a wife that's totally not going to fuck you over, that's you're going to have kids with, or just how society is dealing with men. One of the big things was like the American Psychological Association putting out their whole thing about basically toxic masculinity and this whole thing. That's kind of the red pill community is really talking up. Red pills dressing that. Now, within that, though, once you've been exposed to a lot of these truths, okay, hypergamous nature of women, the female imperative, feminism, and marriage law, family law, how the world of dating is actually working nowadays. How the top 20% of men are sleeping with the top 80% of women, whereas the bottom 80% of men are now just left to no chance of a relationship or sex or anything. And how that is becoming more and more of a problem. So, there's all this stuff you're looking at, all this truth is being, the truth of what is really going on gets thrown at guys. One of three things tends to happen. Well, I mean, it depends. Three main things are, I think, what's important. There could be a fourth or a fifth, depending on how you look at it. But basically, you have kind of what Brooke and I are working towards. Is kind of just red-pilled men, sort of the which is more you start moving into among red pill people. You have moves into the manosphere, guys that are working on self-improvement, upping their game, whether it's different types of game, just trying to get laid, trying to get a relationship, a lot of different business. Yeah, it's just becoming a better version of yourself, being better with women, better with business, better with money, and so on. Better looking, more confident as a person, stuff like that. That's where I just say red pill men. That's kind of like Brooke and I are working on that. Then you have the MGTOW, which can split into two. I think you have the MGTOW, which stands for men going their own way, MGTOW. MGTOW being men that have been exposed to these truths, that are, a world that is basically not the best for being a man, depending upon you look at your different, it's not a patriarchy, so to speak. And they look at it and go, well, I'm just going to go my own way, hence the term MGTOW, men going their own way. I'm going to do all the things of self-improvement, business, making my better version of myself without women. Without the women aspect. They might be able to understand game on a level, but they don't want to engage in game. So in terms of the game of women, they don't want to play the game.
I mean, some do, right?
Some do. That's where it's reserved more for, I consider, the high level MGTOWs. So the guys that because I consider them in terms of incorporating like the closest to red pill men who actually actively engage in dating, game, and such. They're like just below that. Like they will engage with women where they want to, because if we're still men, we still have needs to be met. So they'll still engage in that, but they don't see anything long term or marriage worth it whatsoever. They have zero desire to engage in that. Even just like any sort of beyond a one night stand, even in some cases, depending upon who you're talking to.
I mean, some of them do relationships, just they would not do commitment. They're not getting married under any circumstances.
Oh, okay.
So you go from the MGTOW monk, which are people who basically say, fuck this, fuck society. I'm going to go and live in the bushes, hunt for food, right? And live off the grid in a mud hut cabin.
Right. There is that. But then there's kind of your low level MGTOW, I think, so then kind of touches borders on the third group of incels.
Right.
Borders on that. Basically, Low-level MGTOWs are guys that are literally bitching about the world every goddamn day.
Right, right.
But they're not on it, but they're not necessarily on the incel level of literally hating it, like just
Right.
vitriolic hatred of the game, hatred
Right.
of women, hatred of the game. Because MGTOWs will just see women as an unworthy investment, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas
I mean, yeah.
incels think of them as the plague.
Right.
Incels meaning involuntary celibate, which it depends. I mean, I've heard some arguments to say, well, they're not really incels if they're just voluntary being shitty people. Like, so they say
Yeah.
vol cells, and I'm like, but basically, the incel group are guys that just who some of them legitimately are lacking in certain departments, but I think any man putting forth enough work can gain some footing into having some success with women.
I agree.
If you have enough game, if you have enough money, can be just as attractive of being good looking.
Correct.
I know so there was a conversation that I looked over where so some guys were asking about the dynamic of like the disabled man and the woman,
Yeah.
like a guy who is maybe born with a defect. What about him, like getting with a girl, having
Yeah.
game? So then Richard referred to Sean Stevenson, if you know who that is.
No, I don't know who that is.
Look up on Richard Cooper's channel, Sean Stevenson. Sean Stevenson is this little, I mean, really physically little motivational speaker, motivational self-help therapist,
Oh,
stuff
I
like
think I
that.
know who. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Little
Yeah.
guy, bald,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
but he actually has a wife.
Yes, he does.
I think he even does. I don't know if he has kids. Maybe he
Yeah.
does.
Interesting. Yes. But that's not the same thing. He's not deformed. He's a midget. He's
Can't walk in a
he can't
wheelchair.
walk. Okay, no, I
Barely
don't know that
barely
one
can
then.
use his hands. Bones are basically almost like fatally brittle. Like he could break his bones from a sneeze.
I don't, man. It's not the same one. I remember there used to be that other guy who had no hands and no legs.
That was that pastor we know about.
Yeah, and he got a wife.
But he actually, like, physically, he just was missing parts. Like he wasn't actually having I mean, that was a condition, yes, but it wasn't
Yes.
like a. It depends on how you look at it. Like if you like, he himself, like his face he was actually a decent looking guy.
Right, right.
Took care of
Okay.
himself. I've actually seen him speak before. Yeah,
Nick
but
something.
yeah, Australian maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, Sean Stevenson is this like he's bald and he's if he had I mean he's not a good looking guy, but he's just because he's impacting so many people and he has that status
Okay,
that
I see.
is attractive to her. So it depends. There are ways of granted that's anecdotal, but there are ways of like reclaiming or gaining some sort of sexual value as a man, like sexual market value, being good looking, making money, having status. Um, there are definitely, and then of course there's discrepancies where guys literally have so much freaking money that looks and personality completely don't matter. They can just be the shittiest people, but because they have money, or you can literally look so good that you can be a shitty person and have no money, or
Exactly.
you can be a person of such confidence and game and personality that you look like shit and have no money. There's the three what is it, the three categories I consider to be like affluence, looks, and game. So
Pretty much.
affluence is just money, social status.
Right.
And that's a broad thing there. Looks, that's pretty broad. That can be kind of broad, but it tends to be fairly objective in looks. And then game, confidence, just your game could be incorporate personality, actual like game, how you and confidence in general, personality traits.
Yeah, the seduction game.
Right. you could be, I mean, you could be the ugliest version of Joe Pesci, but have the god tier game and
Yeah,
be scoring with, tens all day.
completely agree. There was a, I'm trying to remember who it was. One of the authors of like the art of seduction used to tell the story of this ancient lover. I can't remember what his name was. It wasn't Don Juan DeMarco. It wasn't Casanova. It was another one. And the story goes that he had a limp, so he was kind of crutched on one side. And I think it was something under. I can't remember the name, but I mean, back in the 1800s, having a limp and stuff like that probably was not, I don't know if it's the 1800s, whatever it was not a good sign. But he was like this masterful seducer. And he coined the phrase the underlook, where he'd kind of prop himself with his brace and he'd put this look on his face that apparently, it just sent women wild, right?
I mean, could you imagine even the little bit of game, the smallest bit of game applied to back then?
Yes, I'm sure that's why people had harems.
Yeah, like I mean, because back then it was like the game, so to speak, was so I shouldn't say so barren of any real technique. It was just social customs.
Right, exactly.
There was no real learning to seduce women. It was just you might pick up on a little bit some other guy did and maybe try that. But actual literature and teaching and any level of that wasn't existing. So I mean, if you took a time machine and the Red Man group sent them back,
I mean, it wouldn't have worked for some people because, I mean, how it worked back then, basically you were stuck in your village, right? So you marry the girl in the village and
no, you
you'll
go to
work.
the city though. What if you went to London,
Right. So
1800 London?
only in like like late 1800s, early 1900s, then people started, going to the cities and stuff like that. But the aristocracy were the only ones playing this game, which is why throughout history, I think 60% of men never reproduced in history. I think that's the statistic.
Right. But I mean, if you just you learn a little bit about the social customs of the 1890s. You take your game, you go back there. How would you do?
Yeah, you might do well. You might do well. Oh, you might get burned at the stake.
Oh,
Either or.
witchcraft.
Witchcraft.
He's a warlock. What? How? He is seducing all the women. He's a warlock.
That's crazy.
Must be casting a spell. No, it's psychology. Witchcraft. What is this
wait.
devil you speak of?
I think it's Lord Byron is the guy that I'm thinking about.
I've heard of that name. Did you ever hear of our friend Count Dankula? His video, the Mad Lads, Absolute Mad Lads.
Yes,
Have you
I've
seen the
a
videos?
few.
Did you see the Alcibiades?
No, I haven't seen. That's a recent one. I haven't seen that.
Alcibiades was a guy from ancient Greece,
Yes.
who was such a diplomat, politician, and somehow had such game that both men and women wanted to fuck women and men wanted to fuck this guy, and he did.
All right then.
He was known to seduce anyone.
I see.
He could seduce anyone. He could talk his way in and out of everything in the political landscape. He something about how he was a top advisor for the Greeks,
Right.
and then he left the Greeks to go and talked his way into the highest courts among the Spartans, told them all the military secrets of the Greeks,
Right.
to then win battles against the Greeks, to then leave them years later to come back and talk his way back to being with the Greeks.
Well, it can't be the Greeks because Spartans were Greek.
No, I'm sorry.
The Turks, maybe.
I don't know. It was just you have to watch the video because
Yeah,
he's even mentioned in I guess the I think one of like the Assassin's Creed games that's based in that time period.
right.
You meet Alcibiades. He's basically just he's such a not. It wasn't like he was a con man. It's just he was had such a way with the words and carrying himself that he could literally fuck anyone, talk to anyone, convince anyone of anything, in and
Right.
out and all around. And he was like selling secrets to every single, all the the different, kingdoms in at the time, and just got away with it.
That's funny. I have yeah. Find the name for it. I'll look it up. I'll look it up. It sounds good.
But anyways, we're a little bit over on time actually, but basically the reason we're mentioning like MGTOW, red pill and such is basically to kind of state like where the difference is, because uh when you start talking about red pill, you rarely ever get get pointed out as, oh, you're a red pill guy that wants to date women and all this stuff. No. You don't have that. You usually are like, oh, you're a MGTOW or an incel.
Yeah.
Because having the idea is that if you have a grievance with the system, that you're this, and not necessarily
But
true.
to be fair, have you ever been called a MGTOW or an incel by another guy?
Yes, actually, yes.
Really? Okay. Because I would have surmised that the majority of people saying that are women or people,
Majority. Like I
right,
could
guys white knighting
like
women.
a couple were
Right.
guys, and dozens upon dozens were women.
Yeah, and that's not a surprise. That's not a surprise because first of all, the red pill is not something that you're really supposed to be discussing with people who are not kind of familiar with the concept, right? People who are plugged in, as the movies, the Matrix says, some people are dependent on the system, and
Yeah, I mean, I have told you this. I never discuss red pill with people that I have a genuine interest in pursuing, like women.
right, yeah, fair enough, fair enough.
And
But it,
that shouldn't be like some big secret. It's just, I'm not gonna try to like
yeah,
if I've kind of if I've talked to someone and I just don't see them as any possible prospect. It's just, I mean, I'll talk. There are women that I've talked to it that are more receptive and they kind of get it.
yeah,
And then when I start getting into maybe the more controversial aspects of it, they'll just say, well, we'll just got, they kind of say, well, I guess I'm just not going to agree, but they're not going to hate me and think I'm some women hating, weirdo or something. They'll just kind of go,
I mean,
eh.
it brings up the premise that I don't know why you'd be talking to women about red pill to begin with, but
Well, when I
yeah,
post, when it like, okay, on Twitter, we have people that we're connected with that will start. I get too involved with Twitter. Women are posting something, and then and it's someone that I've like talked to, and I'm like,
right,
well, that's a bunch of bullshit. And they'll like write something out that's not saying like this is red pill. I'll just post like, well, that's a bunch of bullshit because this, and this.
right,
And then they think like, and then if they're, but they know me and they're like, what? Like, what? Like, I mentioned, I said, well, what if I talked about how Jonathan Haidt, not a red pill guy,
right,
who's talking about, differences in male and females. Well, when you talk about that, you're MGTOW, or you're, that is red pill, but you get called MGTOW. It's like, well,
right. Interesting, interesting. Well, we'll see
yeah.
how it goes.
But we're coming up on our time. Anything else you wanted to add, Brooke?
No, I think it was good. I think the audience has a good idea of where we're hoping to go this year, and yeah, hopefully we will get the chance to work with some of these other guys, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank everyone for joining us. This once again was our 39th episode. So we are back. Of course, we are on Sundays. If you do like the show, definitely give it a like, as well as subscribe to the channel. Be alerted when we're on the air, as well as if I ever post a video ever outside of this show. Uh, um, Follow us on Twitter. I am at Amos Joe. Brooke is at Brooke_Potter. And also, of course, check out our Patreon and our Subscribe Star if you do want to support the show and be part of any exclusive content that we'll be producing once we get subscribers, Subscribe Stars, and Patreons. So thanks for joining us once again, guys. We will see you guys next week, hopefully with a guest.
Thanks for watching, guys.